All right. We are live. We're on Facebook, we're on X, and we are on YouTube. It's been a heck of a week. It's actually been a heck of a past couple of weeks. We've seen in the news the headlines from the National Education Association and their absolutely bonkers meeting with Becky Pringle screaming like an unhinged lunatic on the stage. The only good news, I suppose, that we heard from that one is that Becky Pringle is no longer going to be at the helm of the National Education Association. That's because they actually have term limits at that organization. I just found this out. They only can serve up to 2 terms, 3 years each. So Becky was in there 6 years. She's out in September with a new person named Princess Moss, who looks just as radical as Becky Pringle. If you look at her profile pictures, if you look at some of her statements over time. But more recently, there was another annual convention. This one actually happens every 2 years. Randi Weingarten was back in Washington, D.C., jumping up and down on the stage. Looked like she had a mini trampoline behind her, having a normal time. Here's a quick clip.
Protest together, to vote together, to act together, to bring about change. Real, lasting, life-improving change. That is the power and potential of our movement and of the AFT.
I'm sorry for having the sound on that one. Most people just look at the her jumping up and down and they don't want to turn the sound on. So maybe you didn't turn your sound on. I listened to it over here, and that was just a little bit of it. Before we get into what exactly they were talking about at this convention, what they actually passed, I will tell you they had over 200 pages in resolutions that I thumbed through and read so that you didn't have to. And I was actually surprised as well. You'd think that I wouldn't be surprised about this stuff after a few years of exposing Randi Weingarten and the teachers unions and seeing all their antics during COVID and everything. I couldn't find a single thing that had to do with improving educational outcomes, but there was a lot of Trump derangement syndrome. You could tell just by their speakers how crazy they were. And it sounded more like a political rally than anything else. Her keynote speech mentioned the word power. It was in the title as well, the word power, I think about 18 times. And her affiliate on Facebook posted right after her speech that they were going to use their power to win the elections in November. And her resolutions had a lot to do with that. It was almost borderline demonic, the stuff that they passed as well, trying to take children away from their parents and to keep secrets from them at school behind the parents' back, and to support things like gender affirming care, which is communist speak for sex change surgeries for kids, hormone treatments, and puberty blockers and they said in all stages of life. You don't have to take my word for it. On this podcast today, by the way, it's the Red Pen podcast powered by Americans for Fair Treatment. You might be wondering, where the heck's Chip Rogers? He's the CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment. He's at a meeting in Orlando right now, getting stuff done. So I'm taking control of the podcast this week. It'll just be me, no special guest. Our special guest is basically Randi Weingarten. We're going to be covering a lot of the crap that went down at our convention. But before we get into all that, there's a lot to cover. I talk pretty fast. I think we'll be able to get through all of it. I would be remiss to miss this this headline. Oh my goodness, this is one of the worst ones I've seen in a while because I'm a huge homeschooling advocate. I have a 2-year-old daughter. Her name's Angelina. I'd say we're already homeschooling her right now because she's not with the government, and somehow she's learning how to walk. Somehow she's figuring out how to talk and get around through life without the government factory model school system. I'd say we're already homeschooling her, and we plan to continue to do that. We have a baby boy that we're expecting. We're going to call him Luca in October as well. And we don't plan to give our kids over to the government. But the government school system's shrieking in defense right now because they're losing students left and right, especially after COVID. People got a taste of home-based education. I wouldn't really call it homeschooling because it was forced. It was involuntary. Some people did like government schooling at home, which is not the same thing as pure homeschooling. But nonetheless, people got some sort of taste of home-based education. A lot of people had confidence that they could do it. A lot of people found out their kids were less anxious. They learned more at a fraction of the time. And so homeschooling has doubled since 2019, according to the Census Bureau's own data. And there's been a lot of legislation lately in blue states where Democrats are pushing bills to regulate homeschooling. They've all failed over the past few years to come after our freedoms. One of them in New Jersey, and these things, they stall. They never really stop. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. But in New Jersey, they were trying to infuse DEI curriculum into the homeschools too. They were pushing in Illinois to attach criminal punishments to parents if they didn't comply with all these additional regulations. They were actually even threatening to send parents to jail if they didn't conform to these regulations. The Democrats passed it out of a committee, but after 50,000 or so homeschool families signed up against it, it ultimately did not pass the legislature. They came after homeschool freedom in Hawaii. They came after homeschool freedom in Connecticut, and they won the battle. I think they're going to lose the war. The governor signed the bill, a Democrat, Ned Lamont in Connecticut, when basically this bill will be the first time a state has gone backwards on homeschool freedom in the past 50 or so years, about half a century. I think it's going to get destroyed in court because we have so much precedent, and the Supreme Court's on our side, thankfully, right now, for parental rights being supreme. Your kids don't belong to the government. Basically, what this new law in Connecticut is supposed to do is make you prove your innocence for the right to raise your own kids at home. And so since so many people are leaving to homeschooling, I think that's why they're trying to clamp down on homeschooling. They're trying to make it as least attractive as possible so that they can protect their teachers union bosses in the government school system, because the public schools are funded based on enrollment. If they're losing kids to homeschooling, even if they're not using any school choice program funding, those government schools lose that per student allocation from the state. And so the teachers unions are against it. I looked through the NEA's handbook the other year, a couple of years ago. They scrubbed it after I put it online, but I saved a PDF of it and shared a link for it with everybody, so they couldn't really hide it. I knew they were going to do that. Saved it to the Internet Archive, saved a PDF copy. And in one section of the 450-page or so handbook by the NEA, they come after the homeschoolers and they basically say it's not a quality education. It's like, well, if it's such, I mean, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house, NEA. You guys are doing a freaking horrible job in Chicago with 80 public schools, not a single kid proficient in math. They're spending $30,000 a kid. Homeschool kids aren't getting any support or assistance in most cases, and they're still knocking it out of the park academically. And now this is almost as bad as when Elizabeth Bartholet out of Harvard University in 2020 called to ban homeschooling. She wanted a presumptive ban, they called it, which meant you had to prove your innocence. You have to prove to the government that you're going to do an okay job. And she basically still called for, even if you get that stamp of approval by government officials who have no business telling you what to do, then you would still have to take some courses at the public school. So that's not a presumptive ban. That is a ban on homeschooling. That never happened. It was academics sometimes can't read the room. She published this 80-page law review article right when COVID started, when everybody was homeschooling. And so talk about not knowing how to communicate your ideas very effectively. And that's maybe why she's in the ivory tower. But here we go. Here's another one. This far left lunatic named Jennifer Welch. I had never heard of her before, but supposedly she has a big podcast that the left likes. And she called homeschooling, quote, trickle-down stupidity and a, quote, fundamental crazy Christian problem. She went further and said that it was MAGA on, MAGA on steroids. She called it, she said it was weird and said that multiple times for families to want to raise their own kids, people who love their kids and they want to be around them. She went further and told her podcast co-host that she would basically walk over hot coals and glass to figure out how to get her kids to the government school system just so that she wouldn't have to be around them all the time. I mean, that's one way to admit you hate your kids, that you don't want your kids around you. I mean, that's what's weird, that people in today's society, they hate their kids so much, they want to figure out a way to get as far away from their children as possible. That is what's weird. Homeschooling, being around your family, loving your children, that is the most natural thing in human history. You think about it, homeschooling isn't some experiment. If anything, the factory model government school system is the experiment. People were raising their kids for thousands of years and homeschooling in a sense. And the government school system, the factory model, that's the experiment that has been tried and has failed in recent years. It's actually failed for a long time. And we have data to prove it. I mean, only 20% of kids in America are proficient in math. We spend $21,000 per student, and spending isn't correlated with outcomes. You look at New York City, over $40,000 in spending per student out of your tax dollars. That is over $500,000 for a K through 12 education. You think parents could probably do a little bit better job for 13 years from K through 12 with $500,000? Of course you can. Of course, even if you did nothing, you'd probably be better off than what's happening in the government schools, where your kid is surrounded by violence. I mean, Michael Malice, popular podcaster, has famously said that government schools are literal prisons for children, and one of the only places that kids will ever experience violence in their lives. And that's so true. Some people say, well, oh yeah, you need bullying, and bullying will actually help you become a stronger person. No, if you think about life and when you go to work, you don't really experience that same kind of physical abuse and bullying. And so like the logic of that is basically that you need to abuse young children in order for them to learn about life. No, that is harming the kid. And, there's other ways to socialize. And the latest peer-reviewed review of the evidence on this is actually by Brian Ray. He did one in the Journal of School Choice a few years back, but just this past year, he published one in the Peabody Journal of Education, which is a more left-leaning outlet. And both of these systematic reviews have found, one, the obvious, that homeschoolers knock it out of the park academically compared to their government school counterparts. They do a lot better on academic math and reading outcomes. And even for socialization, basically the evidence is that it's a mixed bag. The kids are no better or worse than the factory model school kids at socialization outcomes, or they're a little better. And I'd say, if you just think about it from a logical standpoint, there's a lot of negative forms of socialization that happen in the government school system. There's the bullying I mentioned. There's safety problems, people getting beat up in fights, drugs, gangs, teen pregnancies happen because of the government school system. And I would say that's not the kind of socialization we want for our kids, not to mention the far left indoctrination with people like this lady, Jennifer Welch, teaching your kids to hate themselves because of their skin color and to hate their country because, there's negative things that happen in our country's past, even though we've done a lot better than so many other countries at advancing human flourishing. And it's the best country on the planet. But you wouldn't know that if you went through the public school system today. And so those are all things that parents are considering when they say, oh, maybe I want to send my kid to a private school. Maybe I want to homeschool my kid because I love my kids. And that shouldn't be something that's viewed as inherently weird, that people want to raise their own children. We've been doing this for a long time. Okay. I've gone far down the rabbit hole of these idiots who attack homeschooling. I think I've kind of said my piece with it. But at the end of the day, we have so much precedent here in America to respect parental rights. It goes back to 1925, the Pierce versus Society of Sisters decision at the Supreme Court, because authoritarians in Oregon wanted to ban all forms of private education. They wanted you to send your kid to the government schools. And it's pretty bad because this happened. These people on the left are not on the right side of history here. this authoritarian impulse to want to control other people's children and to brainwash them and raise them in your socialist worldview to go vote for people like Zohran Mamdani to bury this country into a dark place. And so the radical left has figured out that they don't really have to have their own kids. They can just infiltrate the government school system, use their political tools to do so, use special interests like the teachers' unions to do so, and inculcate their values with other people's children, millions of them. There's about 48 million kids in the government school system. And so conservatives, independents, and rational Democrats need to fight back, strike at the root if we don't want our country going towards the abyss of socialism. Who endorsed Zohran Mamdani? The UFT, which Randi Weingarten was the president of UFT, the teachers unions in New York, before she became the American Federation of Teachers president. And so that's how we need to save our country. But Randi Weingarten, a lot of people don't know this. She actually has been the head of AFT for a while. And she started as the American Federation of Teachers president in 2008. She's been there for about 18 years. And guess what? At their annual convention, who would have guessed? She won re-election. They reported that she won re-election overwhelmingly. And you might say, I'm a teacher. I didn't vote for Randi Weingarten. How did she win re-election? Why didn't I get my ballot in the mail? They like mail-in ballots. Well, they don't have they're not as supportive of direct democracy as they say at the teachers union. The delegates are the ones who vote for whether Randi Weingarten gets to stay in office or not. And there's only about, they have 1.8 million members, but they have a little over 3,000 delegates that go to this annual every 2-year convention. And I didn't see the results, but I saw that they posted that she won re-election. And unlike the NEA, Randi Weingarten doesn't have term limits. She can run forever if she wants, as long as she's alive and has a pulse. And so she's going to be in there at least 20 years, 2 decades, which is what's crazy to me is she had an at-large position at the Democrat National Committee and was also, while she's at the AFT for the past 2 decades, was on the rules committee of the Democrat National Committee. It's just crazy how she can be in a leadership position for the Democrat Party, also be in a leadership position for the union that staffs tons of government schools all across the country. And now, as you'll see from what they passed this year, she's influencing far more than she should have any business influencing, especially when she jumps around on stage like this. Before we get into the resolutions, I got to play this one too. I found this one. By the way, if you see any of these clips that went around, Fox News picked them up as well. A bunch of people picked up these clips, played them on TV all over the place. I was the first person to clip these and put these on X. I should start putting a little watermark, but I guess you can still go back to the YouTube and get it yourself too. But the only reason that these things go viral sometimes is when you have content creators going and having to watch all these hours of video, which might or might not be surprising. Well, thankfully it was surprising because we put spotlight. I'm glad that other people are sharing it. And check out what she said after the first day. You saw her jumping around on stage the first day. That's this one right here.
Protest together.
Jumping. But the second day, she looked a little different, didn't she? Listen to what she had to say.
The throwing out of so much stuff that people just throw up their hands and say, oh no, what are we gonna, all I want to do is stay home. And for those of us who drink, have a glass of wine, or for me, some vodka. But
the other people on stage like, see, I knew vodka was going to come up. Were they drinking with her the night before? It looks like she's hungover. I don't have a problem with drinking, but you just gotta call it out when Randy's doing it. She puts the wine in Weingarten, or maybe she's drunk on power. I'm not quite sure. but she didn't have as much energy on the second day for some reason as she did on the first day. And they had a bunch of speakers before we get into the resolutions. They had a bunch of speakers who it was a political rally. I mean, you've probably seen it on X and all over forms of media and by now, but they had speakers like this guy. He's the head of the California affiliate of Randi Weingarten's union, and his name is Jeff Freitas. Jeff Freitas. And, you know, he's a vice president at Randi Weingarten's union. His shirt says solidarity is the lesson plan. There's a book here. You can't see it. It's kind of small, but it says May Day right here. May Day is a communist holiday. He's got the fist on the shirt coming out of the book. Solidarity is the lesson plan. And so they want kids to be used as political pawns. And when you look at the outcomes and how we're not doing well academically, even though we spend money, it's because we're looking at the wrong outcomes. They are not focused on academics. They are focused on things like, quote, he says, we need to be in the streets to, quote, fight back against this fascist regime. That's what they're focused on. They don't care about, I mean, conservatives have looked at the graphs showing, oh, look, spending up, outcomes flat or down. Where's all the money going? It's not going towards academics. It's, you look at Randi Weingarten's union, 99.9% of their funding for political contributions went to Democrats last election cycle, and it's been like that for decades. This is not new. The teachers union monopoly, the teachers union cartel has become nothing more, always has been, a money laundering operation for the Democrats. It's a political operation that has nothing to do with educating kids. You don't just have to listen to this guy. You don't just have to listen to Randi. You don't have to listen to me. You can listen to Hakeem Jeffries. He was one of their opening speakers. He tells them that he needs them to, quote, throw MAGA extremists out of Congress in November. And he says it's regime change. And who screams in support? The teachers union screams in support. They ate it out of his hands.
Okay, the one regime change that we need to bring about is throw MAGA extremists out of the Congress in November.
Listen to them. They love it.
The MAGA
They're cheering in support. If you don't want to listen to Hakeem Jeffries, I don't. I mean, most people don't, but he was there, and so we had to cover it. You don't want to listen to Randi Weingarten. They also have Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. What did he do? Well, there was some speculation that he might opt into Trump's school choice program because at a lefty conference called the Education Writers Association, which was in his hometown, his home state of Baltimore, where they have 40% of high schools in Baltimore, get this, have not a single kid proficient in math. Not a single child in nearly half of their high schools. 0% math proficiency rates in 40% of Baltimore's high schools. Well, they had this conference there, and they asked Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat, you know, are you going to opt into this tax credit scholarship program? New York's governor has done it. Colorado's governor has done it. They're Democrats. What about you? Because these are tax credit donations. They're not public school dollars. And he gives this kind of both sides response where he says he's never going to leave money on the table when it comes to public schools. He kind of didn't really answer the question, but he didn't say no. And well, the reason that people thought he was saying yes was because the money could be used for public schools too. So you can start a scholarship organization. The school district can do that too and give it to kids in public schools. So it's not your ordinary school choice program where you can only use the scholarships for private schools. It's kind of like this win-win scenario that they had to create in Congress to try to get it done. And so 31 states have already opted in. We thought Wes Moore was going to. Well, what did he use his 5 minutes of fame on stage to do? To bemoan President Trump's school choice program, to talk crap about it. I did some quick digging. He went to a private school himself. He sent his kids to private school. And I also saw that the Washington Free Beacon reported on this a couple years ago. I don't know how I missed this one, but he actually filmed a campaign ad saying how much he loved public schools, get this, in his kid's private school. And he thought no one was going to figure that out. Let me say that again. The hypocrite who hates school choice filmed a campaign ad, Democrat Governor Wes Moore, in his kid's private school, talking about how much he loved public schools. I mean, you really just can't make this stuff up. They're total hypocrites. I did some digging on this bill to repeal President Trump's school choice program, which Randi Weingarten passed a resolution at her convention, the delegates did, to repeal the bill, to the national school choice program. They want to get rid of it. They don't want competition. We knew that. And it's also Trump derangement syndrome because it doesn't take money from the public schools. Well, there's 34 co-sponsors on that bill. The main one's Mark Kelly out of Arizona. He's a Democrat. They're all Democrats. And Mark Kelly sent his own daughter to a private school. Again, I don't blame him for that. You know, anybody should seek out good education for their kids. Like that, I'm not saying don't send your kids to private school. What I'm saying is, if you're going to do that and exercise school choice, don't fight against educational opportunities for others, especially if you're a Democrat who says that, you know, that we should help the least advantaged. Well, Mark Kelly's not helping the least advantaged. He's helping special interest. He's trying to help his buddy Randi Weingarten at the teachers union. And out of all the co-sponsors on that bill, including him, most of them either went to private school themselves or sent their kids to private school. That includes Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. You know, she lied about the whole Native American thing. And even though she's one out of 1,024th percent Native American, she added to her list of lies when she was caught in a campaign video at a campaign event on video, telling a black mom in 2019 in an Atlanta rally that the black mom was basically like, you know, Elizabeth Warren, you know, I'm at your event. I just want the same kind of choices you had. I read somewhere that you sent your kid to a private school. Elizabeth Warren didn't know that I had written about this already, apparently, and posted about it on X. But Elizabeth Warren, quietly and calmly, she kind of went like this and like closed up because you can tell body language sometimes. It seemed like she knew she was lying. And she said, no, my kids went to public schools. So that no was a false denial. Because if she didn't say no, she could have said later on that, well, I didn't technically lie because I did send my kids to public schools, but then I switched them into private schools. And Alex Warren went to private school, actually the majority of his K-12 education in Austin, Texas, and in Pennsylvania. Alex Warren is in his 40s or even 50s now, but she said no and in response. So she clearly lied and tried to cover up her hypocrisy. So let's get into what everybody really wanted to hear about, those resolutions. I just told you they wanted to repeal school choice. That's not very surprising. We knew they didn't like school choice. But this guy who had his May Day shirt on, they actually passed a resolution to push May Day onto kids throughout the nation. So this resolution actually came from Chicago. Chicago had a May Day kind of walkout this year. And for those who don't know, May Day has communist roots. Communist regimes around the world have supported this kind of idea of May Day. In America, we wanted to separate ourselves from that communist holiday. And our leadership here said, let's do Labor Day instead. Like, we're not doing May Day. But what did the teachers unions do? Well, here's the list of resolutions that passed at the 26th convention. The first one, of course, mobilizing for the 2026 elections. But let's find the May Day one really quickly. I could have just brought up my tweets, but there was too many tweets. So here's the list. They want a May Day of civic action. I'm bringing up the screen so you don't have to take my word for it. These are the ones that passed. These were not just considered. These were passed. They went through committees. They passed the floor. They're doing it. So May Day has this kind of, I'll bring it back up, but May Day has this kind of history with the communist regime supporting it. It's on May 1st. And it started out of Chicago, actually, with the Haymarket Affair, which is a historical event back in the late 1800s where workers went on strike. They were upset about a bunch of things. Someone threw a bomb. A bunch of people died. It was a violent event. And you know, the communist regimes have kind of locked on to that Haymarket Affair, and that's where May Day came from. And Chicago teachers unions kind of took it and ran with it this year. And they actually tried to get the whole day off of school. It's like, yeah, of course you didn't want to work. And a lot of they made a deal with the district ultimately to do half a day of school and half a day of political activity. And well, it was actually a full day of political activity. I'll tell you why in a second. But at first you'd think, they didn't get everything they wanted. It's gonna be a little bit better for the kids, right? Because they didn't get everything they wanted. No, it ended up worse for the kids. Why? Because although there's a half a day of school, that half a day was specifically used for political indoctrination. I got a hold of the Chicago Teachers Union's curriculum. I got all the slides earlier this year, right before May Day. It was in April when I posted these on X. They got slides comparing Trump to a fascist dictator. They have slides comparing policing and the prison system to slavery. They have slides where they have an exit ticket where you can't leave the class unless you have you commit to doing some type of social justice stuff, because the whole class was basically about this anti-Trump brainwashing. I'm taking a second because I am pulling up the Chicago Teachers Union's May Day curriculum. I think a lot of the people on here trust what I'm saying, but I don't want you to just trust what I'm saying. I want to bring up their curriculum so that you can trust but verify what the heck they had at their it's like, yeah, I better find it since I'm telling you, you gotta trust but verify. But here it is. Of course, yes. I know I didn't delete these tweets, so they better be up here. So here you go. They're telling the kids in these slides. I'll start from the top. It's just freaking nuts if you haven't seen this already. They're comparing Trump to fascism. They got a picture of him on the slide. What do you expect from this is for the kids. This is not for the teachers. This is for the kids. The teachers get this toolkit to present to the kids. And look, what is fascism? Here's President Trump on here. And they go into all these things about, here's your exit ticket to leave the class. You have to commit to doing something to leave the class. Otherwise, you are trapped in school. They're holding kids hostage until they obviously, kind of regurgitate some of the BS talking points that's pushed in class. And look, they are specifically referring to Trump. Here's what Trump did. He's a fascist. Here's some of the toolkit and the books that they give to the kids. Julian is a mermaid. This is about a kid who thinks he's a girl, so he's a mermaid, right? And so what are they trying to push on? Not high school kids, preschool kids. They want 4-year-olds to start thinking, maybe I'm not a boy. Maybe I'm a girl. It's freaking demonic what they're doing. They're pushing this on little kids. And just to take an aside here, I know I was getting into the May Day stuff, but they passed a resolution. It sounds nice. You're supporting the LGBTQIA plus, whatever the hell all that means, community. They keep adding stuff, but they oppose in the resolution, House Resolution 2616. What is that? Well, that's a resolution to defund schools that push gender ideology on kids. So they're promoting gender ideology. They don't want it to be taken away. And they also part of that bill that Congress passed, House resolution that Congress passed, is that you're not keeping secrets from parents, and you can't socially transition kids behind their parents' backs. Well, the union apparently wants to socially transition children behind their parents' backs. You don't just have to listen to this one. It's in here. They want to keep secrets from parents. The AFT will defend members, and they want to protect kids from forced outing, they call it. What is forced outing? That is telling parents what the hell's going on with their kid if their child is wanting to change their gender at school. They call it forced outing. You see what they do with reframing things. I call it you're keeping secrets from parents, you freaking weirdos. Why in the hell would you want to keep secrets, these sensitive secrets about sexualized topics from parents about their own children? And they try to couch it as protecting the students. You're not going to protect kids any more than their parents are. And if anything, government employees are no saints or angels. They're not immune from problems. And if anything, this creates a recipe for disaster more so than having an open and communication with parents and including them in the conversation. Because the Department of Education itself in 2006 put out a report estimating that 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by the educators themselves. Look it up. You don't have to trust me on this. By the time they graduate from high school. And you might say, Corey, that was 20 years ago. We need new data. Well, you know, the unions don't want the Department of Education to redo that study. Well, someone else redid the study. It's published and talked about at Psychology Today. It was just a couple years ago, much more recent. It's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. The percentage went up from 10% to about 12 to 14%. And, you know, there's so much more technology now where these problems can happen. And basically what I'm trying to say is not all teachers are like this, but not all parents are problematic either. So you can't assume that parents are going to abuse their kids if they have a conversation with their kids and you bring them into that conversation instead of trying to sequester their children in government institutions, these factory schools, and to try to transition the kids behind their parents' back. And we've had too many examples of that to pretend that the parents aren't in the best position. If there's abuse, then that's a separate issue, and the government should step in and hold people accountable, whether that's a government school employee or whether it's a parent that's abusing their kid. That should be held accountable. But you can't say, well, because this might happen, we're going to assume everybody's guilty until proven innocent. We're not going to do that. And okay, so that's getting back to the May Day protests. They started this in Chicago. They want to do it nationwide. And in here, they, you know, I talked about the curriculum. It's, you know, they want to declare it a day of civic action. And the crazy part to me that stood out is that they specifically said they want to use the children. They want the schools to engage in civic learning, they call it for the kids, quote, marches and rallies, quote, political education, labor history programming. They want to program your kids. They want them to not just learn about communism and how great it is, apparently, according to their perspective, but they also want to mobilize the kids. And what did they do in Chicago? What did they do? They had the half a day of learning about all this anti-Trump stuff. And it gets worse. With their deal with the district, what did they do? Because they didn't call in sick or whatever for the full day and strike, they had half a day of programming. Then they bust the freaking kids to the Capitol using taxpayer resources, using the district school buses to go to the Capitol to go and engage in this kind of civic education. In other words, they're using your kids as political pawns for marches and rallies. They want to copy and paste. And where did this resolution come from? It came straight from the CTU. The Chicago Teachers Union affiliate proposed this resolution. It ultimately passed on the floor with the majority of the delegates. Here it is, adopted July 18th. It's now July 21st. And there you have it. Okay, so they passed the May Day resolution. They passed the one about keeping secrets from parents. We talked about those. Let's go down the list. We already mentioned they want to mobilize for the 2026 elections. They called this a "which side are you on" moment. Now, again, if you're not really in tune with this, you might think the teachers union is supposed to be educating kids. They're in charge of our children's school system. Shouldn't they be passing like how to improve reading outcomes or how to improve math? Shouldn't they be I don't know, focusing on increasing teacher salaries? Like, even if they weren't focused on the kids, even if they were just focused on the teachers, wouldn't you want to wouldn't you think they'd be focused on, okay, here's how we're going to increase teacher salary. Here's how we're going to have performance pay, which they don't like. They fight against performance pay. So the best teachers are like, screw the union. You're not doing anything to help me. You're protecting the worst actors in the system. They are a political entity. It's become so freaking obvious. Everybody needs to see this, that look, they want to mobilize for November. They want to win Congress. They had Hakeem Jeffries say that explicitly. They had Raphael Warnock, a Democrat senator from Georgia. He said it on stage too. I didn't bring up the video earlier. That's one that I forgot to bring up. But he said that we're going to win in November because of people like you. And they all cheered. They're all happy. And they don't, what do they mean by we're going to win in November? They mean Democrats are going to control Congress. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Republicans are going to retain control. But all that aside, that is their goal. They want Democrats in control. It's such a big thing that it wasn't just Congress and voting their way into different majorities. They had a resolution. The NEA had this same one, copy paste. They must be talking to each other. It didn't ultimately pass on the floor. They were considering here. I actually brought up the tweet because I took a screenshot of it in the 200-page document. The resolution was it says AFT will call for the impeachment, conviction, and removal of Donald Trump from the U.S. presidency. It goes on further. They want a, quote, national march on Washington, D.C. before the November 2026 midterm elections to impeach, convict, and remove Donald Trump. Sounds like an insurrection to me. Now, that one didn't ultimately pass, but it's weird that the NEA tried to push that one too. The NEA actually had a price tag on theirs and said, we want to spend $5.2 million in doing this. Let's go down the list. Protecting the right to vote. That sounds nice, doesn't it? People should be able to vote. I almost didn't look at this one at first because, people want to be able to vote, whatever. You go in here. Marissa from PragerU actually told me about this when I flew to LA on Tuesday just to go do a live stream with Marissa on this, all the resolutions. And she told me right before we went live, she said, did you see the one where they passed something to oppose the Save America Act? I'm like, you better tell Scott Pressler. I didn't know about this. She pulls it up and I'm like, oh my freaking, you gotta be kidding me. They want illegals to vote. And even if you agreed with that, this is the teachers union. What in the world are they doing passing resolutions to oppose the Save America Act, which basically everybody supports unless you're a sitting member in Congress on the Democrat side, or you're a special interest group that wants more Democrats in office. Why in the world else would you want illegals voting in our election system? We have a civic duty and right to vote. And people who are here legally fought hard to get that. And now the Democrats just want you to not have to show any proof that you're a U.S. citizen to vote. I mean, I think there was something going around pretty viral the other day on Olive Garden having more security in determining who gets their all-you-can-eat pasta than security when it comes to the right, being the person who's supposed to be able to vote, legally voting. And now you might think, why would the teachers union be pushing this? It's pretty simple, honestly. They want more Democrats in office. The Democrats will give them more taxpayer money. That taxpayer money from the government school system will go towards the teachers unions. What do the teachers unions do with that money? I told you a second ago, 99% of it goes to the Democrats. You don't have to take my freaking word for it. I love that we're on a live stream right now because I can just bring this up. Open Secrets has this for any organization. You can look it up for Harvard University. You can look it up for Randi Weingarten's union. Here you go. Open Secrets, American Federation of Teachers. You might think there's a lot of conservative teachers, right? Maybe 50%, maybe at least 40% goes to the Republicans, right? Like maybe 40%. Oh, they have a table for us. Thank you. In the last election cycle, Randi Weingarten's union gave 99.9% of their campaign contributions to Democrats. You might say, that's a blip. That's an outlier. Oh, they have it. They have it over time. 99, 99, 99, 99, 99. 99, 99, 99, 99. Oh, something bad happened in 2004. 98. They must have had a lot of rhinos, or maybe they gave to Green Party or something. I don't know. 99, 99, 90, around that to 99, 99, 98, 98, 98. This is that's all the data they have back to 1990. This is 36 years of data. Randi Weingarten's union gives to Democrats. Welcome to my TED Talk. You can look it up for Harvard. I think their percentage is even lower. It's 95% to Democrats, whereas Randi's union's 99 consistently. Let's get back to so they want illegals to vote. They want to make DC a state. So I guess the Democrats couldn't pack the court. They want to pack the Senate. They know they're going to get 2 Democrats if DC is a state. The founders were pretty clear on this. I did some digging into, the constitutionality of this. This flies in the face of what the founders intended of DC. They did not want DC to be a state. Imagine if DC were in California and all the problems that could cause if there's, one party ruling one place and then one party ruling the federal government. It could create a whole bunch of chaos. And there's only one reason why the teachers union would want to do this. Well, they want 2 more freaking Senate votes. They want to regain control of the Senate. And so that one's obvious. It's just another one of their usual craziness. They hate AI. This one says they're preparing for AI. They want to regulate AI. They want to have a tech tax. They called it a tech tax. And they said they want to take all that tax money from Elon and whoever else has AI, and they want to redirect it not back to taxpayers or military. They want to give it to the public school system. They already have 21,000 a kid. How much more do they need? And so they're modern day Luddites trying to stop AI by taxing it to death and regulating it. May 1st day of civic action, communist holiday. They want to support that and not go to work. This is just usual mobilization stuff. They want more power. Supporting the LGBTQ plus. We already went over that, how they want to keep secrets from parents. You see how the title has nothing to do with what they're actually doing. This one, it says they stand in solidarity with immigrants. It's like, okay, maybe that's not too bad. They want to abolish immigration enforcement. There you go. They want to abolish immigration enforcement. And now, I don't have my wallet with me, but the NEA passed one to give red cards to kids, and I have one of the red cards in my wallet because Marissa from PragerU gave one to me about 2 weeks ago when I went last time to LA. And it's propaganda, fear mongering the kids. They didn't have the red cards in here in this one, but they did call to abolish ICE. And I sometimes try to think of 4D chess. What are the teachers unions trying to do? Why would they want to abolish ICE? What is their motive here? And the only thing, one, it's they hate Trump. Okay, that's the easy explanation. The deeper explanation is that the teachers unions benefit from having more kids in the public schools, whether they're here legally or not. There's a Supreme Court decision that came out in 1982. It's called the Plyler v. Doe decision. I've written about this at Blaze TV and Fox News on 2 separate occasions, calling for the Supreme Court to overturn Plyler. What it does, it was a 5-4 decision in a less conservative court. If it got to the Supreme Court again, it would be overturned. We're pretty dang clear, confident in that. The unions know this so much that they had considered a resolution to oppose efforts to overturn Plyler. It's like, if you catch them flack, you're over the target. We start writing about this, and all of a sudden they're freaking out about it, because when the Plyler decision came out in 1982, there was a young chap named John Roberts, and he wrote a scathing opinion of that ruling. He didn't like it. Guess who John Roberts is now? He's the Chief Justice on the Supreme Court, and oftentimes the swing vote. I think Plyler would be overturned if it gets back. And there are some states, like my home state of Texas, Tennessee, they've been moving on different legislation to try to get at this issue of the current law of the land, is that the federal government, because of that Supreme Court decision, is forcing every single state. You get no choice in the matter, even though education is a state issue. The word education is not in the federal Constitution at all. We should have never gotten a federal Department of Education. It's unconstitutional. It's a violation of the 10th Amendment, as far as I'm concerned. And it's a states' rights issue. But this Supreme Court decision in 1982 requires every state to force their taxpayers to fund education for illegal immigrants. Now, that's a magnet for more illegal immigration. That compounds the problem. It doesn't do anything to fix it. And when you're spending more money on English language learning and trying to assimilate these children in the public school system, there's less money for kids who are here legally. Now, Tennessee tried to pass a bill to, if you still want to welcome those kids, you can, but the school districts would be required to charge them tuition. Or at least one version of the bill in Tennessee was just let's just have some information. Let's just report how many illegals are in our public school system so we know what kind of fiscal impact this is happening. We don't have good data on this. It's not, so, like, even a step forward would be just give us some information. And the unions were very upset about that. And that ultimately, I think, would lead to a Plyler. I think the unions wouldn't even, at this point, I think the unions wouldn't even challenge it. They'd know they'd lose at the Supreme Court. And if they lost in Tennessee, that would cause a domino effect. It would clear the way for other states to say, oh, look, now we don't have to fund education for illegals anymore. And so the teachers unions want to abolish ICE. They want open borders. They want to get rid of any immigration enforcement, because that's their cash cow in a way, because the state can't ask you whether they're here legally or not. So people were telling me a few months ago, when I was writing about this a little more so than I am now, is that, they were hearing about kids in Mexico coming across the border in Texas, and they'd have buses just drop the kids off to come across the border to go to public school in Texas, and at the end of the day go back to Mexico because of this stupid decision from 1982. It needs to be overturned. It's just ridiculous. But all that aside, let's keep going and seeing what else they passed. They admit that the Iranian regime is a bunch of authoritarians, but they're still against the war with Iran. You guessed it. They want to take that money that we're spending in to go to war with Iran. They want to spend it on the public school system. Of course they do. Code Red campaign. Do you know what that is? Nurses. Yeah. So they have nurses in the American Federation of Teachers as well to increase their membership. Support student and educator well-being, tax justice. That sounds like communist gobbledygook. I thought this one was interesting. They want government to, they want government contracts and the collective bargaining agreements to include union housing, special carve-outs in housing projects specifically for union members, for teachers union members. So you get X amount of the condos in the building if you're a union member, which increases the price, whether we like it or not, supply and demand for everybody else. They want artificially low interest rates. And so here you go, government control of the housing market. They want to repeal President Trump's school choice program. I already talked about that. They Well, this was weird. So this one, let's get back up to that one. In a second, I'll talk about their fiduciary duties and using their pension funds for political purposes. That's crazy. I had to dig into it to figure it out. At first, I thought, no, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It is. But here, oh, this doesn't sound bad. Healthcare access. Everybody wants healthcare access. They call for Medicare for all. They want government-controlled healthcare. And they call for health equity. Well, you go into this and you're like, what is that? There's two separate resolutions that call for, you guessed it, gender-affirming care. In one of them, they call for gender-affirming care through all stages of life. There it is. They want culturally competent healthcare for alphabet soup patients across all stages of life. That is code for not just adults. We want kids to be able to get sex change surgeries, gender-affirming care, puberty blockers for kids, all stages of life, and hormone treatments. That's gender-affirming care. They want to mutilate children because of a young child's delusions. And they passed a separate resolution to force employer-provided health insurance to pay for gender-affirming care. Ain't that something? For kids, they want to force the health insurance plans to fund sex change surgeries for children. Just think about that. This is the teachers' unions. They're supposed to be protecting kids. They are for mutilating kids. It is sick. They need to be stopped. And the other resolution, on which also mentioned gender-affirming care, goes a little further. Reproductive health. And it sounds nice. Well, if you ask AI, you ask anybody who's attuned to how they frame things, reproductive, they call for comprehensive reproductive and gender-affirming care, the full spectrum. Well, you ask anybody, comprehensive reproductive care includes abortions, killing unborn children. So you have the teachers' unions passing a resolution not just to botch up children with gender-affirming care, but to force employer-provided health insurance plans to pay for not just the mutilation of young children, but killing unborn children, or what most people would call abortion. That is insane. I mean, even if you're far left radical and let's say you supported comprehensive reproductive health care, which includes abortion, why should the health insurance plan be forced to pay for it? One, even if you say, oh, I should have the right to do this. I don't think you should. I think that's like, it's just wrong. You're killing an unborn child. But why should anybody have to pay for it? That's like a step further. And even if you agreed with that, why is the teachers' union getting involved in this? They need to stay in their lane. They need to leave children alone, leave families alone. And they need to realign their focus to being about education. Never has been. Okay, we have a few more. I got to get through all these. I know it's already been an hour, but this is a lot to get into. And look, you can either watch me for an hour talk about it, or you can dig into it yourself, and it's going to take a lot longer than an hour. Trust me, to watch the full speech, to read through all these things, because everything, like, their titles don't sound half bad. I mean, a lot of them do, but you wouldn't know what the hell they're talking about until you read all of this. And I know my followers can read, but let's be real. We have jobs to do. We have kids to take care of. My daughter's napping right now. I'm kind of lucky right now. But it's a lot of work to look into these things. So let's see. Fighting gun violence. Okay. Oh, this doesn't sound bad, does it? You want quality child care, right? And that should be a reality, right? Oh, they want unionized child care. They want publicly funded, taxpayer funded. There's no public funds, they're taxpayer funds. Universal child care. They want daycare for everybody, whether you're Bill Gates or not, whether you're rich or poor. Here's the kicker, staffed by freaking Randi Weingarten's employees, the unionized employees, and government providers. They want the government to run the childcare. So they don't want like a funding just for people to pay for the existing childcare. No, they want to take it a step further. They want government childcare. They want your kids from cradle to grave. They don't want to just start at 5 years old. They want to say, oh, if you're 1 year old and you want to do daycare, we want your kid in a government institution unionized by us. It's dystopian. It's 1984 stuff. They want, okay, now we'll get back to a little bit more confusing. So I'll get to I'm going to do 3 more. These 2 are the same, and then I'll get to this one. Okay. Fiduciary duties. They want to fight for capital. So it's like, okay, this doesn't sound all that bad, does it? Especially if you don't understand what the hell they're talking about. Well, this gets into pension funds. And what they explicitly call for here is they want their pension trustees, in this resolution, they are advising them not to invest in companies that engage in what they call union busting, job destruction, or what some people might call technological advancement, and public sector privatization. Okay, think about this for a second. They're telling their pension managers, their trustees, not to invest in companies which might save money. And why do companies save money? Why are they cutting costs? They want to maximize shareholder value. They're trying to improve the investment. They want to maximize shareholder value by cutting costs, which could be because of technological advancement, which could be because of privatization, which could be, not working with unions and having them explode your cost. Duh. And so they're literally telling their pension trustees not to invest in companies which are saving money and maximizing shareholder value. Do you see how that is a conflict? Like the sole purpose of having a fiduciary duty of being this manager of the pensions is to maximize shareholder value, is to provide more retirement benefits for the teachers. You want it to be a good investment, right? So you should be making these decisions based solely on that, not for political purposes. Seems like that's exactly what they're doing. And one more that's related, I have to touch. I didn't know who the hell Apollo Global Management was. And so you look into this. Why don't they want to invest in Apollo Management? Aha, look, when in doubt, look for the T word, Trump. Oh, they don't like that the CEO of Apollo promoted and support Trump administration's Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education. So they don't like Trump. This guy does like Trump. So we shouldn't invest in his firm anymore. That has nothing to do with shareholder value and improving the retirement benefits of teachers. I mean, you look a little further, like, well, okay, what else is their problem? This guy, the CEO of Apollo, he donated $50 million of his own money and to the Wharton budget model. You might ask, what's the Wharton budget model? They say it's a policy tool that has been used in congressional debates to oppose legislative proposals for student loan cancellation. People should have to pay their own student loans and taxpayers shouldn't have to pay. There's no such thing as canceling or forgiving student loans. Somebody else has to pay for it. And so they want taxpayers to pay for student loans. And so this guy donated to this technology that's used at a university, and Now we can't invest in them anymore. Are you freaking kidding me? And it gets back to what I exposed earlier this year. Randi Weingarten was on a live stream telling her members, bragging to them about how she went to Target executives, Target the retailer, and complained to them that they weren't being sufficiently anti-immigration enforcement, ICE. And she reminded them and threatened them basically that she said, well, we own 7% of your stock, Target, in our pension funds. It'd be a shame if you lost that money. So basically using the pension funds for as a political cudgel against her opponents to get them to try to do what she wanted, to try to get them to go protest ICE. Congress is already investigating Randi Weingarten for, here's my book, Parent Revolution. You might say that looks familiar because a year later, Randi Weingarten copied my book. Here's the book cover. She's now being investigated for this one for apparently spending $1.4 million, $1.4 million of union dues from the AFT to promote her own book. And I will have to say, I was the first person to figure this out. In September 2025, I posted on X a line item from their LM2 report, publicly available information. $171,000 from Randi Weingarten's union to Feldman Strategies. You might say, I didn't know who Feldman Strategy was. Well, I randomly came across on my Facebook Feldman Strategies saying, oh, congratulations, Randi Weingarten. We're all proud at Feldman Strategies that your book hit the New York Times bestsellers list. They're a PR firm. So you can see what they were doing. They were trying to tell their other clients and prospective clients that we helped her get her book across the finish line. She got on the New York Times list. You should work with us too. You should pay us a bunch of money too. That's what they were doing. That's what got me into looking into the LM2. I saw the connection. Oh my goodness. And so I started asking AFT, Randi's union, on Twitter. At the time, they were still on. They're on Blue Sky now. They ran away already. We bullied them too much and they left. But I said, why in the world are teachers' dues going to promoting Randi Weingarten's book? And I tagged AFT. And I said, especially because she already makes about $600,000 a year. And that's true. If you look at her AFT salary plus other salaries, it's above $600,000. How did they respond to this honest question? They said, please stop misrepresenting our president's salary. And they put a screenshot from their LM2 report showing that she makes $500,000, as if that was any better. It's like, first of all, you dodged my actual question about the money going to promoting her book, which told me something's fishy here. We're on to something. And two, their rebuttal was they should have just not said anything, because 500, 600,000. I mean, yes, you paid them her 500,000, but she gets money from other sources too. That's why I said, I didn't say AFT paid her 500,000. I said she's already making over 600,000. And so Freedom Foundation actually dug and went deeper into the rabbit hole. I just kind of put that out there, and I didn't look any further, but they did. And they found it wasn't just 170,000. It looks like she paid a ghostwriter for legal fees and all this, and it totaled to over $1.4 million. They should also investigate her and her union for apparently pressuring companies and using the pension funds to do so. That must be a breach of fiduciary duty in some form or another. Seems like a big problem. So that should just be the tip of the iceberg, the book problem for Randi. But they should look into the Department of Justice. Got a letter from a group called Consumers Research asking the Department of Justice to look into her for these type of things. It wasn't just Target. It wasn't just these resolutions they passed. Apparently, she did this with Tesla and firearms manufacturers and other companies that she didn't like because they didn't agree with her politically. One more. Okay, say this one for last, because this is another one of those things where I looked at the title and said, I did a double take. I said, they're committing to early reading instruction. Wow. They want kids to read? you got to freaking read the fine print. What do they want? They want preschool programs for everybody funded by the taxpayer. They got to tack on an additional year to K through 12 education in order to teach kids how to read. They want a lot more money. Look, they want funding. You see that already. They need sufficient funding. They need adequate funding. So they want more money. So they have your kids hostage already. They have your taxpayer money already. Now they're saying, if you want your kids to read, you need to give us even more money. You need to give us another year with your children, not just 13 years, but 14 years, not just at 5, but at 4. We need your kids a year earlier. And, if you didn't think that was bad enough, they also say we're going to oppose any measure that relies on punitive accountability measures. And we will oppose all of those that don't have enough money. So if you don't give us enough money, we're not doing it. If you don't, if you rely on punitive accountability measures. So if you try to check our work, well, we're not going to do it. You can't look at what we're doing. You can't hold us accountable in any way. And they also had to throw in the racism word in there as well. They said, oh, if you test us, that's, systemic racism. These are the result of systemic racism and disinvestment. No one's been disinvested, and we give you too much money as it is. They're complaining about direct instruction, which direct instruction is the way to improve reading outcomes. I mean, in their reading resolution, they call direct instruction excessive and say that, if you support all this stuff, you're racist, I guess. I mean, it's crazy. So even the one where you might have said, here's saving grace here, maybe we give her some credit, you can't, because they just wanted more money. They wanted your kid for another year. And they said, oh, by the way, if you check our work, we're not doing it. We're going to oppose any measure where you try to check our work and where you try to hold us accountable for these outcomes. So they want to be able to say that they're improving outcomes without anybody being able to figure out whether they actually did. So there you go. They're mobilizing for the 2026 elections. We talked about far left podcaster Jennifer Welch waging an assault on homeschooling. The government school system needs to stop throwing stones that they live in a glass house. Let parents raise their own children. Stay away from ours. And I just got to point out that, this May Day curriculum. I mean, look, of course, they got the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Look at this propaganda. And migration is an earthright, butterfly crossing, migration is natural. Trump has spread racist lies about Somali immigrants. And, I don't know if that had to do with fraud that was happening in Minnesota or what, but, they're comparing prisons to slavery. Look, they're calling Trump racist again here in this slide. They're mobilizing the kids, telling them to lobby to abolish ICE. Look, call or write your senators to stop the government from passing a bill that, so look, like they are literally using the kids. I'm not making this up. Look, call or write your senators. They are telling the kids to lobby their freaking senators, telling them to oppose ICE. They want them to boycott companies that work with ICE. Target. Randi Weingarten's already doing that. They want the kids to do it too, and their families. I mean, come on. And they want them to protest. Like, we can take action. You can have other forms of resistance, they call it. Create art, go protest. It's just absolutely bonkers. I think I've covered, look, we went way over today because there was just so much ground. Thank you guys so much for coming out. This has been the Red Pen Podcast. And that reminds me, there was another proposal that they didn't pass, but their committee actually recommended it. And it targeted the Americans for Fair Treatment. I got to bring this up before we get off. They don't want teachers leaving their union. The committee recommends concurrence, protecting AFT solidarity against deceptive anti-union campaigns. They mentioned the Freedom Foundation. They mentioned Americans for Fair Treatment in here somewhere. Here it is. Because for the crime of telling teachers that they have rights. We won the Janus decision at the Supreme Court in 2018. And now, whether you're in a right to work state or not, red state or blue state, you can no longer be compelled to pay union dues as a condition of employment. What does that mean? You don't have to be in that abusive relationship anymore. You can leave the union. So one way you can do that is you go to myduesmychoice.org. There's already, I want to say over 19,000 members with Americans for Fair Treatment. But as far as ones who have contacted AFFT explicitly for help with getting out of their government unions, that number's at about 3,500 now in less than a year. So 3,500 people that people are understanding their rights now. And this is why, I mean, it's no coincidence that all of a sudden teachers are leaving the union. There are groups like Freedom Foundation and AFFT, Americans for Fair Treatment, giving that opportunity to families or teachers. And then the unions are like freaking out, like you saw with the Plyler thing that they're freaking out about. They're freaking out about ICE and losing the illegal immigrant students and not being able to get money from them. Now they're freaking out because teachers are waking up too. My first book was called The Parent Revolution. Someone needs to do a second one, maybe with me, called The Teacher Revolution. Teachers are holding the unions accountable now. I was actually at an event last week in Dallas with the Teacher Freedom Alliance, and they had the Teacher Freedom Summit. And we had teachers signing a huge poster board, which was the declaration declaring independence from the teachers' unions. And so teachers are leaving. There's a way out. You can myduesmychoice.com, myduesmychoice.org. Thank you so much for coming out to the Red Pen podcast. I'm looking forward to everybody's feedback, and hopefully we don't have another crazy Randi convention to cover anytime soon, but I hope you learned a lot. There were other things that I probably missed, but I think I got to most of them. Thank you guys so much again. myduesmychoice.org. This was the Red Pen podcast, powered by Americans for Fair Treatment.